Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for June 3rd, 2025. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life that you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your questions and comments via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. And I want to really encourage that today because I know lots and lots of people read the book that we're going to be talking about
And recommended it to us. We have
yeah,
several people did.
Yeah, lots of our audiences has talked up Dana K. White for years on our webcasts, and so we're very excited. We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. And we're going to start by recapping last week's Weekly Tittle, which was called Ask for the Help You Need. The assignment was to engage your spouse, partner, or another member of your family or household in an organizing task or project. Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook. Who negotiated for decluttering cooperation this week? Please let us know in the comments. YouTube viewer Persephone Basilissa 5109, who revealed herself to me as Kit, who we'll be quoting elsewhere in today's show, offered this tittle report. She managed to tie together last week's Weekly Tittle and this week's topic, so she gets like an A++
Bonus
for
points.
that, right?
Right.
She says, what's been working for me with my spouse and his collections, including old computers, software, textbooks, boxes, etc., has been to follow Dana K. White's advice on this topic. I did my own stuff first, as hard and as completely as I could. Then I did neutral stuff, asking all in the family to review my donations before they left the house and veto any that they were willing to take responsibility for storing and maintaining. Though spouse has still refused to part with many of his computer devices, cases, books, etc., after about a year and a half, he started decluttering his own things without prompting. He's greatly downsized his clothes, papers, sports equipment, sentimental items, linens, tabletop games, and computer-related stuff without arguments or blaming. I can't guarantee this approach will work, but it can and did in my case.
And you've discovered the best thing to deal with resistant partners, which is to manage your own stuff and model the behavior and the results that you can get from the work that you're doing. So you can't force someone to do something, but you can show them the rewards of doing the work. And you did that, and he eventually came along for the ride, which while he kept his favorite collection of computer related stuff, and clearly you think that stuff is useless. It doesn't matter because he got rid of so much else that the collection is much less of a burden. So that is a very successful outcome in my book, and congratulations. I think one of the things that causes conflict between partners is what you think of as a cool collection, the other person is not into and therefore thinks it's junk. And so I understand that you're thinking about old software and old hardware, and that's really trash. Like, why is he keeping it? But for him, it's an interesting collection. And so we can't have judgment about what people collect. You can only negotiate about how much space the collection takes up and whether it makes the house more or less livable, right? Like that's the only way in that you can have. Because if you want to have your own collections that they don't understand and leave alone, then you have to leave alone his collection that you don't understand either. So I get it why you think like, yeah, all that stuff should be in the trash. And I'm sure there's some part of him that's like attached to the history of the computer stuff or whatever, whatever it's his work or however he feels attached to it and finds it interesting as a collection. You got to let him have his collection. But it sounds like as an alternative to getting rid of the collection, he got rid of a whole bunch of other stuff, which is great. That's even better. So he made room and you did not badger him or force him or argue with him about it, and you guys got to the end result that you were hoping for. And so I'm super proud of you, and I think it's just a perfect example of you don't make decisions about other people's stuff, you model the behavior that you are hoping that they will participate in. And he did, and yay, we're happy for you.
Connie says, I tried twice to get DH to tidy up his desk. Hopeless.
Right? And it's because it bothers you, but it doesn't bother him. And again, he's probably somebody that modeling behavior would be helpful so that it's so that it's his idea when he starts working instead of your idea, right? Like there's that whole resistance to my wife is nagging me, my wife is making a honey-do list for me, and I'm not participating in the goals that she stated. And so, when you start telling people what to do, everybody resists. And it's a particular, like just in general, no one wants to do what somebody else tells them to do.
Well, and I think if the if the proactive partner in the relationship has been organizing all the us stuff, the neutral stuff that belongs to both of us,
Right.
there's a lot of power in the experience when the less cooperative partner says, do you know where such and such is? And the organizing partner can go lay hands on that in a minute.
Yeah. And
You
say,
know,
here, it's right here.
there's real power to that lesson. Oh, it's like, yeah, I know exactly where that is because I put all of those things right here. And
Because I did it.
yeah,
Right? You're right about that. Again, showing by example. Here's the results of the work that I've done, which is when you ask me for something, I can go immediately put my hand on it.
you
And
too could find your car keys in 1 minute if you put them on the little hook that I
if you
gave you to put them
if you
on.
did what I told you to do, right?
Charlene says, I'm having the same issue. He says there is no problem. He has things under control. You cannot walk into his office. I don't call that under control.
No, but it's also I'm sure he's resisting you complaining about it. Like clearly it's been something that's gotten under your skin and you don't like the look of it and you don't like walking by looking at it. And so I think the best thing you can do to help is to adopt a pretend like there's a screen in front of his office and you don't see it. Like just go la 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 la, I don't see that, and stop talking to him about it completely so that he can turn his defensiveness off, and then at some point he is actually going to be affected by his inability to get in the office.
Right?
And then it becomes his problem to solve because he's discovered the problem himself, and not and it's not in reaction to you pointing out that it's a problem. And so and it may take a while for him to get there. And so you have to like stop commenting on it and stop rolling your eyes in front of him about it and just pretend like it's not there and let him live with it and deal with it because it's going to get bad in there. And then, he's not going to be able to function even though he thinks he has it under control, air quotes. That's just him saving face in front of you. He knows it's not under control. He just feels like he can still get around in there. So he may not have hit his threshold of, I can't deal with this yet.
Yeah.
It's too much for me now. He may not have reached his limit. So you got to quietly look the other way and let him reach his limit.
Well, and we don't know the situation. His desk may be a whole lot of low priority stuff. It may be a whole lot of stuff that there's never any burning emergency to find anything. It's just he's collecting and
Mm,
he feels like he has a handle on what's there. And so in his mind, it's under control.
yeah, that's
Um, we have time for one more and then we should get on with the main topic.
okay.
Renee says, spouse does a lot of grocery shopping and puts refrigerated and frozen items away, but leaves other bags on the floor. It's so bad that I've ended up slipping and even stepping on his chips. He says he'll shelve the items today after Clutter Fairy. If I could help, please.
Well, and I have to say, if the man is going to the grocery store and you don't have to go to the grocery store, I think, and he puts away the cold stuff when he comes home so nothing dies because you spent money on it. You don't want it to die, right? But I think if you participate in the grocery shopping by putting away the dry stuff, like, if somebody was shopping on my behalf and I didn't have to go to the store, I would gladly put the groceries away. Like, thank you, Jesus, I didn't have to go to the store. Like, I'd find that annoying. And so if he is willing to go and does the work of getting it to the house and puts away the cold stuff, I think you can call it your part of the grocery shopping project to put away the dry stuff and and
Or
be happy.
negotiate, or you could negotiate for, could we put the bags that aren't put away yet on the counter instead of the floor? Now that's
Well, and he
assuming there's counter space available for that
right, right,
purpose.
right. But he
That may
did
be a
ask for
separate issue.
help,
True.
right? And so if your participation is that you guys put it away together, that's going to make it easier for both of you guys if you're both participating. And so there you go. You guys can put it away.
Oh, Renee said it is a little more complicated because Renee said he hoards food.
Oh, that's a
So
bad
yeah,
thing.
yeah, that's a
That's an issue.
yeah, and one we probably
We
don't
can't.
have. Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
we
have
don't have
time
the time to
to
address
dig
that.
deep into that because
Okay.
we have a lot to talk about. So we'll
Well,
try
but
and circle back to that
yeah,
at
and I
some point.
think that if you do help him put stuff away, maybe it will help him see what is there, right? Like part of it is he needs to remember how much there is, and he
Yeah,
can do that by trying to put away stuff and realizing how much stuff is already there. So anything that helps him get his hands into the pantry and see how stuffed it is and see how much is there helps him feel like he has enough food. So
yeah.
um, it can only help to try to get him, to support him in putting stuff away so that he does get into it and see it himself.
All
And
right,
we'll
let's
stop
move
there.
on. Let's move on. Yeah. Dana K. White's Decluttering at the Speed of Life, Winning Your Never-Ending Battle with Stuff, is a real-world guide to making steady progress in decluttering your home. The book features a container-based approach to decision-making and a five-step process for reducing clutter in any area of the home. Today, we're going to review Decluttering at the Speed of Life and discuss practical lessons we can learn from this entertaining, accessible decluttering guide.
I hope that you got a chance to read today's book. I hadn't read this one before, so I'm happy to have read it now and give you my book report. Dana K. White does a great job telling her own story of transformation as a typical person who didn't learn how to manage stuff from family, who spent many years building up her own clutter piles in her house before deciding that something really had to change for her. Then she worked her way out of clutter, trying and teaching herself techniques that worked for her and helped her claim her space again and keep it maintained over time. Along the way, she stumbled into techniques that organizing professionals use with their clients, and she learned to coach herself past her natural tendencies to find so many things interesting and her love of a bargain and of a great idea. So her journey is truly relatable, and I'm sure many of you recognize some part of your journey in hers. Dana realized that getting more organized was not the first or rule of order. Her biggest problem was too much stuff, and her priority was to remove the unneeded excess that was crowding her space. So this book focuses on how to declutter specifically and the challenges both physically and emotionally that affect the process. She introduced the idea of the visibility rule, decluttering the visible spaces first, and to keep decluttering them even as they get recluttered before moving on to more hidden spaces. She acknowledges that even as you clear an area, you will keep messing it back up. So she talks about continuing to declutter until the maintenance of a cleared area is easy and quick to get done. She devised her own practical questions about any item that she used to decide what to keep versus what to donate. So she asked these two questions in the middle of her five-step process. And the questions are, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? And then once you know where you would look for it first, then go and take it there right now. And she asked that question specifically to identify whether the item that you're looking at already has a home in the house. And then if you go and take it and put it there, then you are helping yourself declutter without making the situation worse rather than better. So that way you can move stuff immediately to the place where they're supposed to go. And if you have to stop in the middle, or you only have 5 minutes to declutter, or you only have 10 minutes to declutter, you can still get something done without making it worse when you stop. And so, as opposed to a Marie Kondo idea, for instance, where her approach is take it all out of the closet, take it all out of the cabinet. If you don't have the time to do all the work, then you're left with it looking worse until you can get back to it. And this technique that Dana worked out allows you to do a little bit at a time and go make something change, go put something away without making the whole room worse. So the second question she asks is, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? So these are for the things that when you ask the first question and where would I look for it first, and you didn't really have an answer because it didn't really have a home already. And then she's saying, if you needed it, would it ever occur to you that you already had it? And typically the answer is no, because she didn't really know that you had it at all. So in that thought process, she's saying, if you didn't if you were looking for it and it wouldn't even occur to you that you already had it, then you probably don't need to keep it. It can probably go in the donation box. The other benefit of this approach is that you're handling each item one at a time. So, like I said, you're not going to make a bigger mess, and you can stop and start with any amount of free time without making it worse. And so it also gets past the idea that you have to have 12 free hours before you can start a decluttering project. You
Right.
can just go, I have 5 minutes. I'm going to stand here and ask the question about this one thing and go put it away. And then my 5 minutes are up and I can move on. Right. And so I think from that standpoint, it's a very practical one in terms of how much free time you have at any point in time to work on it. Dana came to recognize the value of less is good and better is good, meaning it doesn't have to be perfect, because having less is a good outcome. Having less in your house is a great outcome. And having the space be in better shape is also a good outcome. So, in other words, perfection gets in the way. We all know that. And when you're overwhelmed, so does worrying about the organizing part of the project. So, just focus on decluttering and on getting your home contents in alignment with the volume of your container. In other words, your house is your container. And if you worry about decluttering until your contents fit your house, you'll have excellent results over time. You can deal with organizing it later, but in the meantime, you can be making it less and making it better by donating away, putting things away, making things leave the house. And that's only going to ever improve your space. She developed a 5-step decluttering technique that works for any clutter in the house. Step 1 is to take out the trash. Trash is she says it's the most obvious, easiest thing to do. And that's easy to start. You can take out the trash. The second super easy thing to do is do the easy stuff, which is move things that already have a home back to their home. So in any room, there's a certain amount of things that are in that room, but they're not supposed to be there. They really belong somewhere else and they just never got there. And so if you go and you don't have to think about it because you already know it has a home and a space. And so then you just go put them away where they go. And those are the two first easy steps. The third step is what she calls duh clutter. The stuff that makes you ask, duh, why do I have that? And that stuff goes straight into the donation bin as well. Those are the things that you find and you're like, what is this doing here? Why do I have it? So that was an easy one. Now you're down to the things that you can't handle the first 3 steps. And this is where her 2 decluttering questions come in. So these are for the things that don't already have a home. And you ask, where would you think to put this? Where would you think to find this if you were looking for it? And then the second question, which now has gone out of my head again.
It's if I needed this item,
There you
would it
go.
occur to me that I already have one?
Yeah, exactly. So you're asking those 2 questions, and in those questions, you are finding out if there's a place that makes sense to you where it could live, or whether it makes sense for it to be donated. And so that's the filtering step. And then her last step is to make it fit. So apply the container concept to the space that you're working in, whether it's a little drawer or a little bin or whatever. You're using the concept of it has to fit in the container. And then if it doesn't fit in the container, you have to negotiate whether, yeah, I found another one, and that's why the scarves are in there. She talks about the scarves. Like, sure, you can have a million scarves, but why? And so she picked a container, and when when it was full of scarves, that was enough. And so then she would find another scarf, and she'd be like, okay, if I want to keep this one, I have to take another one out. And so it allowed her to compare and contrast. She's picking priorities. Here's on my favorites. I'm always going to put my favorites in the container first. And then if there's room, I can have things that aren't as much of my favorite. But if there's not room, then I've got my favorites, and then the rest need to be donated because I'm keeping the favorites in the container. And so I think that's a really, she backed into great parameters for herself about how to minimize the contents and how to manage not keeping an endless supply of scarves, for instance, that she would get it down to what would fit in this container in the closet, and that was the end of the list. And then she goes on to say, that it's plenty enough, and she doesn't regret it, and she loves living with the results. So she explains these steps in more detail, of course, in the book, and I'll let you go check out the deeper explanation of them. But her method works for her and millions of others. If you're struggling to get started, if you're overwhelmed by a job that feels too big, and you need an idea of how to tackle your project, her book and her steps could be your blueprint for getting emotion. I met Dana K. White at a NAPO conference one, and I missed the opportunity to have dinner with her. So I'm glad I got the chance to get into her book, and I'm sure you'll all find great value from her approach. It is accessible, and most specifically because she is you. She's not a professional organizer. She's a person who worked it out for herself in her own home. And so the methods are tried and true. She's had years of experience doing it, and she can talk to you from personal experience about, and she does in the book, about what kinds of things she had to confront, what kind of choices she had to make, how she had to go about making these changes and adjusting her house. And it's a wonderful, approachable way to deal with it. And so I kudos on the book. Yay. Good job on the book. And I think you guys would benefit from it greatly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we sent an, we sent out a survey because, of course, a lot
That's
of
what we do.
well, and a lot of the fun of a good book is sharing it with a bunch of other people who've read it. And thank you to everybody who responded to the survey. I think as of this morning, we had about 30 responses, and it really they're so thoughtful. It's like 30 individual book reviews. It's
Oh,
the survey results have
yeah.
a lot of fascinating content. We're going to share as much as we can right now. The first question we asked was, what useful decluttering and organizing strategies or methods did you take away from the book? The most popular answer to this question was, without a doubt, the container concept.
Hmm.
The idea of letting the containers in which you store stuff set the limit on what you keep. We're going to dig deeper into that when we get to a question specifically about that, but here are a few things our audience had to say. Intignia said, the container concept was life-changing for me, a new way of looking at things. Containers are not just to hold things, they are there to limit the amount of stuff you have.
Hmm.
Leanna says, container concept, you can keep anything, you just can't keep everything. And Jennifer says, the container is the bad guy, the boundary.
Isn't that a great idea? Yeah, and I think, this container concept is a major mind shift for a lot of people. And
Right.
my perfect example of this is when I help people with paper, the first question that I get asked is, do I need to go buy a new file cabinet? And my answer is always, no, no. You do not need to go buy a new container. Adding more containers so that you can keep more of the stuff is the opposite of making your space more livable. It is taking up more footprint with your space. And so putting more of your stuff in another container is not the goal here. That's not what she's talking about. She is absolutely talking about set a container. The bookcase is a container, the bin is a container, the shelf is a container. Define the container and what's supposed to go in it, and then when nothing else fits in the container, you're done. And then you really have to start the priority sorting of but I still have 500 books that need to go on the bookshelf. And it's like, then you got to pick your favorites because your favorites got to stay and the 500 that won't fit have to go. And you just have to figure out of all of your books, which are the ones that are the favorites that need to go on the bookshelf.
Now, she does not rule out adding more containers, but she points out that, well, with the scarf example, she says, if you're going to keep, 10,000 scarves, well, then you're going to have to figure out how to wear them to cover all the other parts
As
of your
clothing,
body.
right?
Because
Right.
if your closet has nothing in it but scarves, you don't get to have any shirts or socks or
Or
undies.
pants.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a great, like, she figured out you can't just, your house is a contain, the ultimate container is your house. Those four walls of your house are not moving. And so you can only fill it up and stuff it deeper and deeper. So if you just keep adding more and more and more to everything, you eventually will fill up the house. And by the time you fill up the house, you're in big trouble. So having a container deployed in all sites of in all parts of the house to manage all different types of collections helps you hit a container before you hit the four walls of your house. And that makes it more manageable, right? If you wait for the house, which is the box, to fill up, you are really starting from, and that's basically where she says she started from, that the house was completely full and overflowing and nothing had a place to go because she was out of storage space, and that was how she talks about hitting rock bottom for her, and that was really where she started. And now she's in a completely different place. And so the idea of setting a boundary to anything that you own, you don't have to keep growing the collection of black pants. You can you can have, you can look at the 45 black pants you have and decide which of the 15 that you would actually wear and let the 30 of them go. And then that 1 foot of the clothing rod is where the black pants go, and you can't have more than that. It's like, that's a reasonable concept, and I think it works all over the place. Good job.
I She also makes the point in several places in the book that the container can be the bad guy for you. So this can remove some of the emotion.
Yes.
The decluttering questions are also designed, I think, to remove the emotion.
A
And we
little bit,
definitely
yeah.
I think everybody who regularly participates in this webcast probably recognizes that getting the emotion out is half the battle.
Right. It's super
So
important.
we'll talk. I want to talk about that more later. I want to hear
Okay.
more comments from our live audience too about does it work that way for you?
Mm.
Do Dana White's methods help take the emotion out for you? Um, let's see. The next one. Uh, C responded, one doesn't have to take everything out to declutter a space, a la Marie Kondo.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a popular answer as well. Dana White's no mess decluttering method is an answer that a lot of people gave. We'll talk about that some more too, because we asked a question specifically about that.
Okay.
Leanna says, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first, rather than where should this go?
Yes. And I thought that was an interesting point that she made because she is basically saying, don't stop and imagine where other people might think it should go or whether you logically think it should go. Ask yourself where you would go look for it, wherever that is, no judgment. And so that to me is working with your preferences and your perception of the house and how you're following your own. She uses the term instinct. You're following your own instinct about where something should go, which makes it the easiest possible solution for you. If you would instinctively think, oh, I would look for this in the fill in the blank, then it doesn't matter whether that's logical or makes sense to anybody else. Do what is instinctively real to you, and then you are working with yourself instead of against yourself in trying to decide where something goes. And I
Yeah.
thought that was a really it was a really clever
Well,
perception.
And it's practical versus theoretical.
Yes, yes,
You
yes.
know, it's what's gonna work
What's going to actually work, right?
rather than, in a perfect world, where would I put this?
This should be, yeah, this
Yeah,
should be.
yeah,
Well, and there's
yeah.
that whole
Should
should word, right?
yeah,
Like
the
you're
should
just,
word. Yeah,
yeah, you're being, you're feeling like there's a rule that you have to follow,
yeah,
whether that rule makes sense to you or not.
yeah.
And so,
Well, whose rule is it? Where
yeah,
did the rule come from?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And so she's sort of end around that by asking yourself, where would I think to look for it? Which is when I tap my own brain to solve this problem, what would I do? And then you're like working with yourself instead of against yourself, which is great.
okay. Leslie said her useful takeaway from the book was the difference between decluttering, organizing, and cleaning, and how I was conflating those in my mind, like the author did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The no mess method is okay for short time sessions of decluttering, or if you have toddlers around interrupting you constantly. It's not my favorite method, but it does have value.
There you go. And
Lisa mentioned take it there now, as did several others.
you're right.
And Kit says her recommendation to use it up has been very helpful with excess cleaners, pantry items, and holiday and sentimental things. I've created lots of space under my sinks and in my cupboards by actually using things I had spent money on. And when I accidentally broke an heirloom tile trivet on Mother's Day and no one else in the family felt sentimental enough to glue it back together, it was easy to let it go.
There you go. Good
Uh,
job.
Use it up really resonates with me too. I've
Right.
spoken before. I've spoken before in our webcasts about my grandmother who had beautiful linens stored away in a drawer for so long that when you tried to unfold them, they cracked at the
Yeah.
folds
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they had just, I
Been
guess,
sitting there dying in
dry rotted
place.
in the drawer instead of just been used,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's go on to the next question. What parts or aspects of the book did you find difficult to grasp or challenging to apply to your home or situation? We have to talk about, where it doesn't work for people.
Right. Right.
To be honest in our review, Jenna says her laundry day idea just doesn't work for me. When I have a load of laundry, I do it regardless of when it is. Waiting is not good for me.
Good to know about yourself, and if clearly you don't have problems getting into action around that, and so good deal. You have a load and you go do it, then that's all that really matters, right? I don't think she's saying that that you have to do it her way at all. So I think good for you that you worked out one that does work.
Jeanette says, I can't pare books and yarn down to one container,
Right.
but other items are easy for me to pare down. Baking dishes, shoes, makeup, clothes. But
Which is great.
I think, I don't think she's not saying, well, I mean, another way to think of this is I can't fit my art supplies in one container unless I define the container in this case as a shelving unit with about 5 shelves on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the container. I
Right.
don't I don't worry about how much room any part of that is taking up as long as the totality of it fits in those 5 shelves, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the truth is, books and yarn are probably your collections. And so if you're paring down other things in the house, and that leaves you room to have those collections and have them be bigger than maybe somebody else might, right? Because they're your
Right.
collections. And so I think that works as long as you're dialing back in the space so that you feel like, and you're allocating your space to the things that you care about, which are books and yarn. And so if you're giving away living space to those items and you're making that space available by decluttering other stuff, I think, you're doing it how you want it. You're living your life in your house how you want it. And so there you go. It's cool.
Leslie says the take it there now method is a bit too scattered and unfocused for me. I would rather finish a small area and then move items back that have a designated home elsewhere in the house. Several people also mentioned that take it there now doesn't work for them because of physical limitations, mobility issues, and such.
Mm-hmm.
That or that it just sort of burns up too much energy, takes too much energy out of the process.
Right.
And then several people mentioned take it there now doesn't work for them because of the risk of distractions along the way.
Right.
You know, I think especially for people who have attention deficit issues, take it there now could be a little risky.
And take it there now also works with people with ADHD because you have something in your hand and you have it on your mind and you go and complete the loop immediately. So
Gotcha. Oh yeah.
there's that little added extra too, right? Because it's easy for you to keep picking up and putting down things and getting distracted even where you're decluttering. And so
Yeah.
um, I see the point from both sides. And if you have the ability to make a pile of things that you have to take somewhere else, and then you pause in the process and go put 15 things away and then come back, that's okay. If you can do that, great. Like you can certainly modify it to what works for you.
Right. Evelyn says the no mess decluttering method is not for me because it seems so slow. I prefer to take everything out of a drawer, closet, shelf, etc., because it forces me to really deal with the stuff until I'm done.
Cool. So if you can stay focused that long and you have the time to pick the drawer and then you agree with yourself that you're going to stay there until it's finished and you get to completion, great. Then that's your solution, right? So go for it. Yeah, like if you have the capacity to stay focused on it until you get through the to the end, then use it and benefit from it. Absolutely.
Okay, next we ask our audience to please share your favorite quotations or key ideas and concepts from the book. I'm going to try to avoid ones we've already covered, so we can get to some of the fresh ones. Kit quotes, decluttering is a constant task and will be a constant task for the rest of your life. This means that I don't have to get my home to a perfect state and keep it there. Instead, it's always in flux and can be worked on a bit at a time.
I think that's a very healthy way to look at it. It is, you have to scrub the toilet and you have to keep scrubbing the toilet because you keep using the toilet. And
Mhm.
so the same concept here, you got to declutter and you're going to have to keep decluttering. And so it's in flux and you can work on it a bit at a time and that's cool.
Danetta says, any amount I can declutter leaves the space easier to clean and manage.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
Lisa says, another key concept of Dana's is the action of looking. The encouragement of looking often helps reveal that the pile that has been avoided often surprisingly contains a percentage of trash and sometimes missing items.
Right?
Jacqueline added, look, look, always look. As much as you think you know or remember what is in a space or container, you're probably wrong and look anyway. Even if you just close it up and put it back without moving or decluttering anything, your memory is now refreshed.
And I have heard this from clients a million times. They will say to me, I'll say, what's over there? And they'll say, blah, blah, blah. And I go over there and open it up. And 9 times out of 10, it's 50% of what they thought, but it's not even remotely 100% of what they thought. And there's trash in there. And when they start looking at it, they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. I can get rid of that. Like it's just because they finally opened the box to look at it and got past their reluctance to engage. It's so much easier for them to deal with the contents. It's very rarely that somebody, what they think is in the box is exactly what's in the box. And so recognize that about yourself and go, like she says, go look.
Sandra cited a heartwarming quote in chapter 23. Decluttering isn't easy. It's heart-wrenching, takes time, and requires changing the way you've done things in the past and the way you view your stuff.
Exactly, which is why we have a whole show
Right?
because we're talking to you about how you look at your stuff and how you change what you've done in the past and how you change your point of view around it so that you can reclaim your space. And so, yeah, it was that I did. I read that quote and thought, oh, that's a perfect description. It's heart-wrenching, it takes time, and you got to change everything. It's like, yeah, yeah, she's right.
Afraid so. Oh, one more. Intignia mentioned avoiding procrasticlutter.
That was such a great term.
Yeah.
Procrastinator is so awesome.
And procrasticlutter is when you leave something unfinished and it's sitting around making your home look junky instead of tidy, such as laundry left on the couch instead of being folded or hung up and put away.
Even though you know where it's supposed to go. That was the piece. Like it's clutter that's
Right.
there, even though there is an end place for it to be. And
Yeah.
you just haven't gotten it there.
Okay. Question number 4 addressed no mess decluttering. And Dana K. White suggests a decluttering process that requires making a final decision about each item, keep, trash, or donate, and placing the item in its appropriate home right away rather than in a keep pile or a keep box for later organizing. And so we asked if you've used her method, how has the take it right there approach worked for you? What are the pros and cons of this strategy? C says, I sort of use her method. I use trays and baskets when decluttering or tidying one room. Each tray is designated for items that have to go to that particular room. Since walking is a bit difficult for me, it saves me many steps. When done tidying, I take each tray to the room and place it there and start procedure again from that next room.
Which is a good adaptation for your physical limitations. So, great job on figuring it out. And you're making one trip with a tray that has several things that need to go to another place. And that saves you from going back and forth a lot. If you think of it, Dana K. White's version of the process to take it there right now, one at a time, is how to get your 10,000 steps in.
Right?
And this tray method is how to minimize your traveling to go with whatever physical limitations you have. So great job. Good
Um,
adaptation for yourself.
Liana says Dana suggests when looking for easy stuff with an assigned home but not located there for whatever reason, that you look around the area being decluttered for other items that can be taken to the same home at the same time to save on steps.
Mm,
I do think take it there now is key to not ending up with multiple piles of stuff that never actually get dealt with when
mm.
life happens. She put that in quotations, and your work session ends prematurely. You might end up just stacking a bunch of piles, and then you might not remember quite what you were doing whenever you get back to the project.
Yeah, if you've slept since then, when you
Right.
go back in the room, you're probably like, "What was this pile?" And you'll have to refresh yourself a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
Um,
think it is a good thought.
Jetta says, when I'm decluttering an area, I don't take it there now, but I do take it there when I stop working on area. That way I don't stop my momentum, but will have it where it needs to be immediately afterwards.
Yeah, and the only hang up with that method for some people is that you spend time working on an area and decluttering it and getting it how you want, and you use a lot of energy doing that, and then you're left with, okay, now I got to take all these things, all these
Right.
piles, and go distribute them, and basically you have another 30 minutes or an hour of work to do, and you've probably already run out of energy. So it is a problem that it's sort of like not leaving the 15 minutes at the end of a project to clean up. You got to sort of manage your time and your energy level to allow you the time to make sure you have the time before you completely run out of steam to go take those piles and put them away. And so how I do this with clients is, we work for an hour, we make some piles, and then I use this as an opportunity to say, let's take a break and go put some things away. And so it gives them sort of a decision making break. They put in an hour of work. We have a pile of 10 things that we need to go put up. And we stop and we take 5 minutes and we walk around and put those things away as one trip. And then we go back to decluttering some more. And so it prevents from having to do it all at the end and when you have the least amount of energy left. And so if we do that a couple of times as we work, by the time you get to the end of the third hour of the appointment and we have the last collection of things that need to be relocated, we've already distributed 2/3 of it. And now we're down to a much smaller pile that you can then do at the end with your last bit of energy. And so it just makes it's sort of like interim, using it as a mental break and a mental pause and go put things away as you go along. And that seems to help people not feel overwhelmed when they're out of energy with piles that have to be relocated all at once.
Yeah. Kit says, take it there now is a little nagging voice in the back of my mind when I'm doing things all day long. It's a reminder to just do whatever small task it is now because I'm ADHD and will get distracted. But the task will already be done. Of course, I might get distracted on the way, but that's actually less likely than leaving a keep pile on the floor indefinitely.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's the ADHD version of that process.
yeah.
It's
Well,
good.
and actually several people have chimed in. Oh, Suzanne said, take it there now works best for this ADHD gal. And
Right.
Tammy says it would work for me with ADHD. Take it now.
Right.
Okay, let's go on to question number
Five.
five, which was about containers, the container concept. A big part of White's decluttering philosophy is the container concept, this idea of setting firm limits on the containers you use to hold your stuff, where containers are understood to mean the boxes, bins, racks, baskets, drawers, cabinets, shelves, etc., as well as the rooms that must contain the containers, and then decluttering to fit those limits.
Yep.
So we ask, if you've used your method, how has the container concept helped or hindered you? What are the pros and cons of this methodology? And are there areas or categories of stuff for which it works better than others? Kit said the container concept was crucial for me, understanding that I really just needed to get rid of excess, perfectly good stuff. Once I saw every space in my home as a container and began to define the spaces, decluttering and organizing became much easier.
Which is the essential value of the container concept in general. Like it just tells you if you don't want to be drowning in your house, you're going to end up getting rid of perfectly good stuff that is just excess. And because you have too much in the house. And so that container concept just helps you deal with that, and it's really helpful idea.
I think also that that idea of defining the spaces
Mm-hmm.
is very valuable because it's probably natural to tend to define a space according to how you're using it now, as
Yeah.
opposed to what, what would really work for you
Yeah,
and
what would be useful
what do
for
you
what
want,
you got?
what do you really want?
Mm.
And so you may have stuff shoved into your clothing closets that doesn't belong there because that's not the defined purpose of the clothing closet. The bedroom closet should not have the extra tools that you didn't put in the garage for some reason.
Right, right, right.
Um, Lisa says, I think the container concept definitely works well for collections of supplies, like sponges, for example. So often things get purchased in excess, especially when we forget we already have extras of particular supplies. I think it does help rein things in for clothing, coffee cups, the usual culprits.
Right. And and this goes with the idea that as the house gets more out of control, we rebuy things that we already have because we can't find the ones that we have. And when you start doing this decluttering and you start putting all the sponges together and you realize you have 50 sponges that you can't possibly use in your lifetime, and so deciding, okay, 10 sponges will probably be just fine, and the other 40 are perfectly good and usable, but I can donate them and let them be used now because by the time I get through those 10 sponges, it'll be, 10 years from now. And the sponges right now may be starting to deteriorate a little bit. So you might as well release them in to be used currently, and you save what will be a sufficient supply for the duration.
Lynn says, I love this concept. It helped immensely in sorting through my mother's things while incorporating
Mm.
my own into the house. It forced me to make choices about any duplicates or currently unuseful items and helped me sort the keep things into logical container categories that fit my needs rather than continuing to use my mom's unorganized system that wasn't working for me.
Right? Exactly. It does create a system where none existed before. And it's not a hard system to follow. Figure out the container. When the container's full, you have to start prioritizing which are your favorites so that you can release the ones that are excess.
Well,
There's that excess, perfectly good excess.
and Dana, White pairs the container concept with the one in, one out rule.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
if you've already decided I'm keeping this bin full of scarves, and then someone gives you a beautiful new scarf, then you have to either stuff it in the container, which might be able to do with scarves, or
Right.
honor the rule and take out one that you never wear and
Right. Put the
let
new
it
one
go.
in, let
Yeah.
another one go that's not as much that you don't like as much.
Allison says the concept was useful when I moved a few years ago, especially for toiletries. My favorites went in the box first, and everything that didn't fit got pitched.
There you go. That's the container concept in action. Absolutely.
We should move on to our sixth survey question
Okay.
about the visibility rule. Dana White suggests the visibility rule. Start every session of decluttering in the most visible places in your home. If you've used her method, how has the visibility rule helped or hindered your decluttering? What are the pros and cons of this approach? CJ says the visibility rule has helped not just my home, but my marriage.
Ooh.
When I worked in hidden spaces first, I know my husband would be wondering, without saying it, has anything actually been decluttered? Whereas when I do the visible areas first, he walks in and says, wow, you've worked so hard and got so much done. Even at times when it didn't take very long to complete those areas before moving on to hidden spaces. For myself, I enjoy seeing the results of my work on a daily basis. I'm much less stressed about having people come into our home, especially the cat sitters, when we're away. There's
Right.
always more decluttering to do, but when the visible spaces are clear, everything feels so much better.
And you can release a lot of shame around people being in the house, right? The idea of the cat sitter sitting in the living room while it looks like a wreck is super embarrassing, right? But if you have decluttered the visible areas that someone who's coming in to work in your house, to take care of your animals, to be come to visit, then you feel much less burdened by what your house looks like in the face of those people. And it's totally worth it because then you feel comfortable. You've added back, you feel less stressed by the social aspect of people coming in the house. And in the meantime, you can be working on the hidden areas afterwards and getting those done so that you get to live with the results as well. And so, yeah, it's a great idea.
Jane says, historically, I've liked to declutter a specific space during a decluttering session, closet, drawer, pantry, etc. Recently, though, I stood at my front door and looked in to see what folks see from there. This was hugely helpful in reducing my fears of opening the front door.
Oh, yeah.
The space seen is relatively small and also pretty easy to keep tidy. Knowing that gave me more motivation to keep that area clear of clutter.
And let her be less afraid about answering the door and opening the door,
Right.
right? If she felt like she was trying to prevent people from seeing a mess, and then when she actually went there and looked, she realized what they could see was a much smaller view than you thought, and that area was easy to keep up. And so then she could release another bad feeling around it, and the idea of decluttering gets easier. And so anytime you can remove one of the negative emotions around dealing with your house, it only makes dealing with it better. And so good for her to figure that out.
Yeah. Um, I was uncomfortable with the visibility rule at first. It took me some time to warm up to that because
Mm,
of the thought of, well, I don't want to have to do again what I've already done. I'd rather go make new progress somewhere else. She talked about the visibility rule creating momentum,
yes.
but that didn't sound quite right to me. And I think what the visibility rule maybe really does is creates a habit. It builds a habit. Like if you always start by, well, I've got to clear off the little table next to the front door again for the umpteenth time, it gets easier. She mentions that. She says, it's
Yes.
easier the next time, and then it's even easier the time after that. And I think some of the power of it comes from the habit you're establishing.
And the repetition dwindling down what you have to maintain too. Like every time you go back to it, more stuff goes out. And then you peel another layer of the onion, more goes out, more goes out, more goes out, and you keep shrinking what you have to manage there until it's a small enough project that you can do it quickly, that picking it up, your everyday life that impacts that space can be picked up quickly and without a lot of hassle. And
Well,
so she sort of like, you keep restarting so that eventually you get down to, I can clear this up on a moment's notice in a few minutes and we're done. And that's the goal you're trying to get to, but you can't always get there right away. And so recircling the visible areas until you can go, anytime I can stop and reset this in 5 minutes. Perfect. And then you really can move on to something else because you've got that habit of, it only takes 5 minutes and I can come in there and go boop 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 and it's all back together, and no worries. Like, and then it is your habit and your muscle memory and your easy thing to fix.
and you're
And
and you're resetting your expectations. So, the clear table by the front door comes to look right to you. That's what
yes,
looks right to you, as
yes, yes,
opposed
yes.
to the well, here, these things clearly obviously don't go here because
Right.
I've moved them from here 4 times previously. You know,
Right.
you're resetting your own expectations and maybe the expectations of the other members of your household.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great idea to think about, that you make the clear and clean version of that space the rule instead of the exception.
Right.
You flip it around. And so then it means that you get onto it more regularly and more easily and more quickly.
Now we've run out of time, so I can't get to. There were a few people who offered counterpoints about why the visibility rule maybe doesn't work quite so well for them, and we're just out of time. So I encourage you to check out the survey results for yourself. And if you didn't take the survey, if you read the book and didn't take the survey, please go ahead and do so because
Dive
we
in.
will keep reading your responses. It's really fascinating stuff.
Right.
Let's talk about next week. We're going to be gone next week. Gayle is off to where?
I'm going to Minneapolis. It's time for a NAPA board meeting, and so we're doing strategic planning. So we're gonna be tied up for the whole week. So I'm gonna be there. I'm leaving Monday morning, and I won't be home until Friday night.
So we will have no live show next week, but we'll be back on Tuesday, June 17th at the usual time.
Yeah.
When we meet in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about collections, how they accumulate, why they get out of control, and what you can do to rein them in when the need arises. And the need will arise sooner or later.
You will fill up your container with your collections.
So watch your email for an announcement.
Right?
Gayle, why don't you give us the tittle?
This week's title is Take It There Now. This week's assignment is to put Dana K. White's Take It There Now approach into practice as many times as you can. So, as you work through any decluttering task or project this week, try to keep the lessons of decluttering at the speed of life in mind. Start with the easiest task. Clear any obvious trash from the area that you're working on. And next, focus on items that already have a defined storage place in your home. To the extent that you're able, carry each of these items directly to the place that it belongs. Notice what you notice. Are you happy with your results? Did Take It There Now help or impede your decluttering effort? And did you see improvement because you stopped and took things there now as you figured out where they were supposed to go, as you realized that this had a home and it just didn't get put away? If you go and put all your things away that you can, how much improvement have you made in your house and how does it feel different? Go work on that and come back and tell us next time. We'll be happy to hear about it.
All right, if you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from our audience, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere that you find us. You can always reach us through our website at clutterfairhouston.com.
Don't forget, you can join and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and see all of our back catalog of me and Ed talking about organizing all these years. So there's plenty to go watch, and you can watch and then I get grayer and older as the videos go by.
And sometimes fatter and thinner
Right,
in
depending on
sequence.
what's
Yeah,
going on,
yeah.
right?
How depending on how well the exercise regimen is going.
Right.
Um, we're also I want to crowdsource suggestions for the next book. I have a few ideas
Mm.
that people have suggested already. And so I'm gonna do my darndest this week to get the half-baked book club page off the ground on the website so that there will be a place where you can easily drop a suggestion to us.
Of the
Um,
book to cover
so we can
next
plan for the next book that we'll read
next
and
quarter.
next quarter around we'll have another book for around Labor Day. First probably our first episode or second one in September.
Okie
Um,
dokie.
there you go.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We are always happy to see you. Thanks for participating in the book club this week. If you got to read the book, I hope you found it helpful. It was a good exercise for me to read as a professional, and I really enjoyed her book. So thanks for suggesting it to us. Thanks for participating, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.